Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Stephen Brown, and I guess this is kind of part 2 of this video. If you didn't watch part 1, I will link it above the screen right now, where I talked about UFA defensemen that the Maple Leafs could look to target this offseason. According to Luke Flox's our most recent mailbag, where he just threw a bunch of names at the wall. But in today's video, we're going to be looking at trade options that the Maple Leafs could potentially be looking to target this offseason, or maybe into next season in and around the trade deadline. But it is important to note, and it's mentioned here in the article, and Bob McKenzie also mentioned it in and around the trade deadline, the Toronto Maple Leafs are looking for right-handed shooting defensemen or left-handed shooting defensemen that could play the right side, who have 2 or 3 years left on their deal. They're looking for players with term at a reasonable amount. But before we start looking at analytics and specific players, it's important to note what the Maple Leafs have to work with before going into a trade, because this is a very possible lineup that they could go into opening night with next year. Now, you guys are probably sick of hearing me say this, but I think that the Maple Leafs are best suited in waiting for the trade deadline next year to pull the trigger on a trade for a defenseman that fits the criteria that I mentioned before, because it gives you more time to develop a Rasmus Sandin or Timothy Liljegren. It gives you more time to see if Travis Dermott can play the right side, because then you don't have to look for a left-handed shooting defenseman that can play the right side. You already have one in Travis Dermott, who's a cost-controlled asset at this point in his career. It gives you more time to see what you have in Liljegren, and it gives you more time to see how things are going to flesh out with the pairings. And then at that point, at next year's trade deadline, your prospects are more developed. You have guys like Timothy Liljegren and Travis Dermott that you could possibly use as trade chips. You have your first round pick. So there's more guys that you could go after at that point, because you have the assets to do it. And Andreas Johnsson is on LTIR here because I think he is 100% played his last game in a Maple Leafs uniform. He will not be on the team to start next season. I'm willing to put money down on that. Now, for those of you that have been watching these videos for a while now and following along, you know my opinions on Rasmus Sandin. I'm not 100% sold that he's a full-time NHLer right now. There were games last season where he was benched for an entire period at a time. There were games where he only played 10 or 11 minutes a night. And there were games where he was a healthy scratch last season. And to be honest with you, I don't think the Maple Leafs would have burned the first year on his entry-level deal if they weren't in the position that they were with injuries. And with the Maple Leafs having guys like Morgan Rielly and Mikko Lehtinen, who looks like he's going to command a lot of power play time on the team next season, at least that's what his KHL numbers are suggesting, there's not going to be a lot of minutes available for Rasmus Sandin in terms of special teams, because he already doesn't kill penalties. So unless the Maple Leafs want to use 2 defensemen on one of their power play units, which I don't think is the most efficient thing to do, to practice 2 different styles of power plays, there's not going to be very many minutes available for Rasmus Sandin on special teams. It'd just be way more beneficial for him to go down to the minors and play 20 to 25 minutes a night and develop his game on the power play and penalty kill. So you could go the route of trading Travis Dermott, and that would hypothetically give you about $3.66 million to go out there and get a defenseman via trade. But if you're going to go down that route, you have to make sure that you can justify doing that by getting a defenseman back that is certainly better than Travis Dermott, and that you could justify giving up assets and spending more against the cap for. Which could be a very tall task to do, because at this point in Travis Dermott's career, he's going to be a very cost-controlled asset for at least another year or 2. And like I'm projecting in this armchair GM, you could probably get him at about $1.5 million for a season or 2 on a bridge deal. But then you have to start asking yourself, can I justify giving $300,000 over the league minimum salary to a guy like Kyle Clifford when I can get a guy for $700K and have $300,000 more to spend on a defenseman? You have to start asking yourself those questions. And now we got $3.9 million to work with, and now you got to start asking yourself questions here. Well, maybe can I trade Alexander Kerfoot to free up more cap space to go out there and get a defenseman that might really solidify this blue line? And I might make a whole video dedicated to just talking about if the Maple Leafs should trade Alexander Kerfoot this offseason, because Chris Johnson went on an episode of the Steve Dangle podcast and said that 2 of Kasperi Kapanen, Alexander Kerfoot, and Andreas Johnsson could be traded this offseason. So maybe that's another video that you guys might want to see. So comment Kerfoot in the comment section if you want to see just a standalone video on my opinion of that. But for right now, I'm going to say no. I want to give Kerfoot another chance. And if you want to hear my reasoning for that, like I said, comment Kerfoot down below in the comment section, and I will make that video. And I'm not really a huge fan of trading a guy like Justin Holl because he's a big right-handed shooting defenseman who eats up a lot of minutes on the penalty kill, and we already have a huge hole on the penalty kill already as it is with losing a guy like Cody Ceci. Whether you like him or not, the Maple Leafs are going to need to replace his minutes on the penalty kill somehow. And for $2 million, I actually think Justin Holl gives you a lot of value here, and he'd be really hard to replace at that price point, and we got him for the next 3 seasons. But let's establish a range here before we start looking at actual players to acquire. I know it's a lot of information to take in before we actually look at the names, but at the absolute most that I can see the Maple Leafs having, the most that I could justify stripping this team this offseason is about $7.5 million, and that's if you removed Kerfoot, Dermott, and Clifford from this hypothetical armchair GM roster. But on the low end, if let's say you did not want to trade Alexander Kerfoot like I do, I don't want to trade him, and let's say you didn't want to trade Travis Dermott either, at the low end, the Maple Leafs could have about $3.3-ish million to work with. So we're going to work with a range of about $3.3 to $7.5 million, but more than likely on the lower end of that. So there's a lot of names on this list, and we're going to eliminate a couple right off the bat. Guys, Josh Manson to the Toronto Maple Leafs is not happening unless it's like Alexander Kerfoot and a first-round pick, maybe another little prospect added on top of that. I can justify doing that, but the Anaheim Ducks want an absolute king's ransom for this guy, and I'm not giving up Timothy Liljegren. And if you're okay with including Timothy Liljegren in a trade for Josh Manson, this is just one of those times that I'm just going to flat out tell you you're 100% wrong, and I'm not budging on it. This is pick224.com, a very useful prospect comparison tool, and I've used it before in my videos. This is looking at defensemen in the American League, and it's sorted by primary points per games played, just looking at it from a pure offensive standpoint. Here's Timothy Liljegren. And here's Erik Brannstrom. Timothy Liljegren had a more productive season in the American Hockey League offensively than Erik Brannstrom, and Erik Brannstrom was one of the main pieces included in the Mark Stone trade a couple of seasons ago. Now, Brannstrom might have a step on Liljegren a little bit defensively, but I'm not willing to just include Timothy Liljegren in any trade for any defenseman. Definitely not one that's already 27 and is aging and plays a style of game that's very, very taxing on the body. So Josh Manson right away getting deleted from this list. Just not comfortable giving up Timothy Liljegren. And if you are, you're wrong. Not in that instance. Matt Dumba, not really the type of defenseman that I would target if I was Kyle Dubas. I mean, he's more of an offensive defenseman than anything. Rasmus Ristolainen, that is just an absolute joke. Just going to delete that one right off the bat. So now we're left with a little bit more of a polished list here that we can kind of narrow down from. Now let's just start with the guy at the very top of this list, Brett Pesce. Now it's been long rumored that the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Carolina Hurricanes were going to hook up in a trade for a defenseman. William Nylander's name was in there for a very long time, but a guy like Brett Pesce is a guy that I'm okay trading Timothy Liljegren for, because as we'll see here, he's going to be 25 going on 26, so he is the right age there. And when we're looking at the contract, he is a guy that's going to be signed for multiple seasons. He is a right-handed shooting defenseman. He is a little bit of a bigger guy too, so that is a guy that I'm okay including Timothy Liljegren in a package for. Now, David Savard is a guy that we're going to kind of get to know because the Maple Leafs are playing the Columbus Blue Jackets in the play-in round, and he is a guy that I would 100% like the Maple Leafs to take a look at, but he doesn't really fit the bill in terms of having a lot of term or that 2 or 3 years that Kyle Dubas really covets, so I wouldn't be comfortable giving up Timothy Liljegren for this player. I don't know if I'm even comfortable giving up Alexander Kerfoot for this player, if I'm really being honest with you, but he is going to be a UFA after the end of next season, so I could see why the Columbus Blue Jackets might want to move him in the offseason to get as much as they possibly can for him if he doesn't want to resign. Troy Stetcher. Troy Stetcher was actually almost a Toronto Maple Leaf in a deal involving Tyson Barrie at this year's trade deadline, but the Maple Leafs were kind of afraid of Troy Stetcher in the sense that he is arbitration eligible this offseason, so we don't really know what that number is going to be. The arbitrator could say, hey, we're going to award you $4.5 million on a one-year deal, similarly to what they did with Cody Ceci, and then they were just kind of stuck with him afterwards. Maybe he becomes an option if the Maple Leafs can talk to him and get a gauge of what he's looking for in a contract negotiation. But until then, I'm steering away from this player because I'd be worried about that arbitration case too. Matt Benning was also almost a Toronto Maple Leaf a couple of trade deadlines ago in a trade that would have involved Connor Brown and something else going to the Edmonton Oilers for, I believe, Drake Caggiula and Matt Benning. And Matt Benning, not necessarily a huge impact guy, but he definitely would give the Maple Leafs value. And I mean, if you're looking at in terms of what it would cost to get him from the Oilers, there's another player on this list. I might as well just talk about him right now, Adam Larsson. Now, the Oilers are an interesting team in terms of defensemen because they're going to have 5 of them under contract for next season. 2 of them are RFAs, and that's not including guys like Evan Bouchard and Philip Broberg, who are prospects of theirs that they might want to be giving an opportunity to. So you can see why a guy like Matt Benning or even Adam Larsson would be expendable for them. And if they're wanting to free up a bit of cap space, maybe they'd rather trade Adam Larsson than Matt Benning. And at that point, hey, I mean, the Maple Leafs have a slightly used Andreas Johnsson coming off of hip surgery that they might be interested in. I mean, I know he's coming off of hip surgery, but he is a pretty feisty, useful forward when he's healthy. Now, Matt Roy is a guy that I kind of forgot to talk about here, but if the Maple Leafs could somehow find a way to pry him away from the LA Kings, that would be awesome. He is a right-handed shooting defenseman making $700K next year. His analytics are really, really good. Talk about right-handed shooting Travis Dermott, pretty much. And I don't know what that would cost. I'm not comfortable giving up Timothy Liljegren in this trade because Matt Roy's not too much of a proven commodity, but I am confident enough to give up an Alexander Kerfoot. I am confident enough to give up Kerfoot and a couple of picks, maybe. Kerfoot, a couple of picks, and a prospect. Maybe that's the sort of thing where the Maple Leafs can choose to do a quantity over quality type deal and lure this player away from the LA Kings. Now, the next guy that I'm going to talk about here, I'm just going to call him Ilya for now because I don't really know how to pronounce that last name, and that's a really tough read for me because the Arizona Coyotes, I don't really know how to judge them. I don't really know what direction they're moving in. I have no clue how to gauge them, but if the Maple Leafs could somehow get this player away from them, I mean, he is a guy that's 26, will be 27 come playoff time next year in April or whenever the playoffs are next year. But this is also another guy that I would be okay with exploring trading for and probably a cheaper option. Colin Miller's going to get his own little tab here because I was showing the past 2 seasons, but it's very weird. He was getting healthy scratched in Vegas in the 18-19 season. Him and Gerard Gallant just did not get along, and then he went to Buffalo afterwards, and Buffalo was really, really bad. But when you're looking at his contract, it just doesn't make any sense. $3.9-ish million for the next 2 seasons after this one. No, thank you. No idea how long this video is going to be, so I'm going to try to keep the outro nice, short, and sweet here, but make sure to like the video if you did like it, subscribe for more because more is always on the way, and make sure to let me know down in the comment section if I missed anyone that the Maple Leafs should maybe try to target via trade. I know Mackenzie Weegar's name gets talked about a little bit, but I don't think that Florida's going to trade with a divisional rival there. Connor Murphy's name has been brought up here on this channel before, but I don't know if the Blackhawks are too motivated to make that deal right now, but let me know of some other names down in the comment section. And like I said, make sure to like the video if you did like it. Subscribe for more because more is always on the way. And remember, guys, if Buffalo comes a call and offering you a defenseman, you don't pick up. Well, maybe if it's Rasmus Dahlin.